All right. Hey, welcome to all out there, and particularly welcome to Miriam. Miriam, thanks for
Thank you.
joining me. Yeah,
Yeah,
glad you're
thanks for having
here.
me here.
Yeah. So you're calling in from the Mountain Time Zone, I understand.
Yeah,
Um,
here in Denver.
yeah, very cool, very cool. Um, and hi, howdy from Cleveland, which yes, it rocks. Okay, we'll just get that out of the way now. Cleveland's pretty awesome. But yeah, we're here today to just talk a little bit about CSS, which is a particular interest to both me and to Miriam, and also about Fall Summit. So, but first of all, Miriam, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where today? Like what's your background? Where what do you study in school or that sort of thing to give us a sense of your journey to where you are now.
Sure. I studied theater,
Okay.
so here I am writing CSS. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's totally obvious.
Yeah, I actually left school to run a theater company around 2006, and ran the company for a couple of years. We needed a website.
Right.
I asked my brother if he would help me build a website, and he said he would show me how.
Okay.
And I think he sent me your book,
Oh,
and
all right.
yeah, which was a bit of a thick compendium for getting started, but
Yeah.
also your CSS Edge website, which got me really excited. I was like,
Mm,
um, I was having a lot of fun playing with these experiments and this, you were doing um, fake transparency before the web was supporting transparency
yeah.
and all sorts of like hover interactions that were pretty wild. And
Mm.
I had a lot of fun with that, uh,
Oh wow.
and built out our theater website, and then eventually decided I was going to move to Denver and started taking freelance clients. Wasn't sure it was going to work out.
Mm.
Um, so I was also looking at like doing overhire at theater companies, hanging lights or something like that, become an
Right.
electrician. I don't know. See if I could start a theater company out here.
Mm-hmm.
And what took off was the CSS. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
here I am.
Crazy CSS stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, you still do theater stuff. I mean, you recently run, in the last few years, won an award for a theater production.
Yeah. It's always sort of been, I mean, I came into it thinking that that was my main gig and this was my side job.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it hasn't turned out exactly that way, but I still do both and feel like I really need that in my life. And I have a band too, and I wrote a novel, and
Mm-hmm.
then a local theater company wanted to adapt my novel, and they brought me on to help write that. That's the one I won an award for.
Yeah.
Um, but I have a theater company. We're sort of like we do a show every 2 years or something,
Yeah.
whenever we are inspired and feel like it and have
Mm-hmm.
some extra time. Whenever I have a lull in clients.
Put together a show. Hey
Exactly.
kids, let's
So
put on a show at Dad's barn.
exactly. Let's
Which,
skip barn.
yeah, honestly, is how Jeffrey and I sometimes characterize starting out an event apart. We're just like, let's put a show on the road.
Exactly. That's
Just
great.
painted our own backdrops and sewed our own costumes, all that kind of.
Hey,
Yeah,
come a little ways since then.
a little bit, yeah, but grew slowly.
Yeah.
As we all have, come a little way since early days. So 2006, yeah, when you were getting started. That's interesting. CSS Edge at that point was a few years old, but it was still,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
actually it was maybe more like 2004 that
Mm.
I was actually looking at that, and then uh,
But yeah, that was that weird interregnum, as I
mm-hmm.
sometimes call it, where like nothing was really changing because
Yeah,
Internet Explorer, Microsoft had just said, we're done with Internet Explorer. IE6 is enough. We're not going to do anything else. And
yeah.
the
It
other,
was funny. I got a job at an insurance company for a year in there,
mm-hmm,
and they hired me as a print designer.
okay,
Um, but their website was all tables and Dreamweaver, and I just started. They didn't have much for me to do, so I just started
hmm,
rebuilding it in CSS.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I showed it to them, and they were like, "Nah, CSS isn't going to take off. We're not ready for that yet."
it's just a fad. So this web thing. There's no future in it. So yeah, I had a boss tell me that once. In his defense, it was 1993. It's like, don't be messing with that. The web thing is, yeah, there's nothing there. But yeah, that's cool. So I'm curious. So your talk at Fall Summit is about name brand CSS conventions. Did you start out using name brand CSS conventions, or were you like building it all by hand and then sort of later came to, BEM or OOCSS or whatever?
Yeah, I would say that I've never actually used any of them in a like all in sense. I've just always found them interesting.
Okay.
When I around 2008, when we were just starting our company, I saw Natalie Downs' CSS systems talk.
Oh, yeah.
And I really liked the way she thought about things. And I liked the way she was sort of moving away from, it was right when grid systems and frameworks were becoming huge. And there were so many, it was like 960 grid system and Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Wait, Blueprint. Blueprint is different from Bootstrap.
That's true.
And there were like all of these, and they were sort of taking over the world. And she was saying, well, what if we just had ways of talking about CSS and ways of thinking about CSS that we could build things quickly and consistently without relying on a big library. And I liked that. And I mean, I also realized looking back, I was doing the same kind of work that she was. So small agency work, which has a different set of constraints than big corporate Facebook clients, where we weren't dealing with the question of how do you handle 100,000 pages.
Right.
We were dealing with, more reasonable size sites and apps. So it's not surprising to me that I was drawn to her approach.
Right.
But then OOCSS came out right around the same time, and Nicole was doing some interesting things there. And then there was sort of this boom of them. And I've just always followed along and been interested in the way that they're thinking about CSS. I mean, I'm very like systems minded. I'm curious about the mental models here. So that's always what gets me. It's not like exactly how are they writing their class names. It's what is the mental model that's leading them to this class name. And that's what I'm always fascinated with.
So is there one mental model in particular you find particularly interesting?
Well, I would say it's the one that stems out of, I would say Natalie Down and Nicole Sullivan there in 2008, 2009 really laid the framework for everything that's happened since.
Okay.
And a lot of the others are coming up with slightly different ways of talking about it or slightly different ways of finessing it. But those two sort of set the groundwork.
Okay.
And with a mental model that comes from the Cascade directly. And I think Natalie was the most clear about that. Like, our organizing convention and our naming convention are the Cascade. We'll build from there. And I think Inverted Triangle CSS does a good job building on that idea, sort of giving a good picture of what that looks like. More recently, Cube also sort of builds on that. So I think there's a lot out there. And in a lot of ways, BEM, or what people have latched onto about BEM, is just a way of naming things, and sort of can be attached to any mental model.
Okay. Yeah, no, well.
So people use it in various ways and whatever. But yeah, to me, it's the Cascade. The Cascade is the mental model, and everything comes out of that.
That's interesting, because what I hear so many people say about frameworks or naming conventions is that they're meant to make people not have to think about the Cascade. Like utility CSS, or, usually one of the criticisms that gets leveled is, you're trying to ignore the Cascade, but the Cascade is really important. So that's interesting to me that, you're the way you see it is that these things are coming out of the Cascade.
Well, I think there are those two. I think both of those are happening. So the ones I'm saying the ones I'm drawn to are the ones that come out of the Cascade.
Okay.
And then I struggle with the ones that don't. And I think BEM, like I said, gets applied to both. So that one's sort of a, like, people on both sides of that mental model use BEM as a naming structure. And some of them are using it to really lock down and say, okay, we're not going to use any specificity besides a single class. Everything is a single class. There's no specificity. And I look at that and I think, actually, you know, having the ability to create layers is what the cascade is all about. And when we remove that ability, and then we use frameworks that shuffle our CSS, and we lose also source order, we've just deleted half the cascade, and we don't gain something from it. We actually get more conflicts because we can't set up explicit layering. And that explicit layering is there for us to say some things should override other things. So I always feel like you try to avoid the cascade, you make the cascade worse.
Right. Yeah. So do you think that some of the perception of CSS as being fragile and broken and difficult to work with stems from people who are forced to work in that sort of model?
Yeah, I think partially. I mean, I think it is self-sabotaging to an extent. But also, I would say part of it comes from, if you're coming in from other languages and you have this sense that good code means isolated code and means ignoring context, you've fundamentally misunderstood CSS. Like CSS is only about context. And I mean, the cascade is about context. The cascade is about browsers making decisions in a million different environments, which is nothing but context impacting your code.
Right.
And as soon as we try to control it, there's a great quote from the first website, the World Wide Web Project website on CERN, where it says, in order to be, paraphrasing, in order to be cross-device, we will never control fonts or colors, for example. And I look at that and I think, yeah, what works about CSS is that we don't control fonts and colors. We suggest them. And there's this language of hints and suggestions throughout all that early documentation.
Yeah.
We don't control fonts and colors. We suggest fonts and colors, and then the browser figures it out.
Right.
And that's just fundamentally different from JavaScript or Python or any other language where you control the environment and you lock everything down and you, so.
Yeah, it's that has been always one of the things that's drawn me to the web, is that it isn't, it's not locked down, but what you get for that is that universality that was in those initial documents. Like the whole, like, one of the fundamental design principles of the web is, you know, ubiquity over consistency. It's doesn't matter how you're coming to this information, you should be able to get the information, and it might not be exactly the same as it is for someone else, but you're still getting it. Which, yeah, like you say, a lot of languages, that's not the deal. It's like, we want to be very consistent. Maybe you can only run this in a few runtime environments, but it's consistent. Like you're not going to be surprised at the other end of, oh, someone had a different size monitor, so my build failed. Right? That's not a thing.
And it's all built in with this, like, browsers are allowed to ignore code they don't understand. That's how HTML and CSS are universally compatible, is because browsers can just ignore things, which is, that's scary. Yeah. I understand coming to CSS and being scared by that, but it's how the language works. And to me, it's like live performance. I'm like, great, I do theater. I understand this, like, like it's going to be different every time. We're going to have different actors do it. We're going to have different venues. That's all right.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but are you likening HTML and CSS development to improv theater? Is that what we're saying here?
Well, you know, we get to write a script. We even get to write stage directions. It's just that the director might ignore them.
Right. And the browser might go, yes, and.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, but I'm also going to do this thing. um, yeah, that's fascinating. I never really thought of it quite that way, but yeah, that whole live theater thing, where every audience is different.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah.
I actually did a little community theater, and I was in a production of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which is still one of my
That's
favorite plays of all time. I mean, it's fantastic.
that's
But
great.
it was in the round, and there was one show where at the beginning of the third act, somebody in the audience just decided to start interacting, like talking back, trying to contribute their own dialogue, and we just had to roll with it as
Yeah,
best we
yeah.
could. So it was like one of the characters says to the other, "Are you there?" And all of a sudden, "Yeah, I'm here." Wait, what? Yikes. So all right, yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah.
That is a good analogy. It is very much like live theater. That's very cool. So this is all. I mean, you're gonna be talking about at least some of this for the fall summit at the end of the month.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what should we look forward to? What are we gonna learn?
Well, I'm going to go through, and I always structure it a little bit historically, because I
Mhm.
think like each convention is sort of a reaction to the conventions before it, and a building on. And
Mhm.
so I go through quite a few of them,
Okay.
and just look at what are they reacting to, what
Mhm.
problem are they most interested in. I mean, it's sort of like OOCSS and CSS Systems, those two in 2008, 2009 from Natalie and Nicole.
Mhm.
Um, they actually work pretty well together and have a lot of the same solutions, but they're clearly interested in different problems.
Mm.
For Natalie, it's like, how am I going to go from one client to the next and churn out just beautiful apps for
Mhm.
each client, and then hand off something maintainable. And for Nicole, it's like, how am I going to make this work on 100,000 pages
Mm.
without growing my CSS to that
Right.
extent? And CSS is designed for that. I mean, uh, we talk about it like CSS doesn't scale or something, or that's a thing people say, and I don't get it. It was sort of,
Mm.
the initial concept was, if we can pull this out of the HTML, we can style everything in 3 lines of code instead of uh, putting
Mm.
it in line. And
Mhm.
um, but so those are sort of interesting, different concerns that they're dealing with, and I think each convention that's come out since has had a similar sort of. There's one particular thing they're trying to figure out: how are we going to do this at our company? And the
Mhm.
companies are different. Um, and I think there's a trend in our industry to look at, like, what did Salesforce do? What did Facebook do? What did
Mhm.
uh, and we should all do that. They
Right.
probably solved it. And I don't think that's true. Um, Companies are different. Companies are solving different problems. Products are different.
Right.
No reason for us all to use the same systems.
Yeah.
Let's look at these different ways, and we can mix and match and
Mhm.
come to our own conclusions. So hopefully you'll get a lot of tools to start mixing and matching. And
Mm.
uh, so I'll cover both sort of the mental models, what they're thinking about, and I'll also talk about the specifics of how do they pull it off, how are they
Okay.
putting it together, and then hopefully you can take that toolkit and
Mhm.
uh, not only have a hammer in your toolkit, but also have, I don't know, what do you need? Chisels?
Chisel. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started using chisels recently.
Oh yeah.
I've already blunted one. So it's well, I say I've already blunted one as if I have more than just the one. But yeah. Anyway.
You
So yeah.
doing woodcuts?
Actually, I was trying to chisel remnants of wood flooring out of corners.
Oh,
It's a long story and we don't need to get into it.
okay, great.
It started with a flood and it's going to eventually end with I don't know what, but we're still in the middle of it. But yeah, so I'm actually looking forward to it because I, I'm going to be honest, I have not really thought about naming conventions in this way. I
Mhm.
mean, sure, at some level, I might have thought to myself, well, naming convention such and so was developed by somebody to solve whatever problem they have. But like,
Mhm.
have I ever really thought about what the problem they were trying to solve was? No, I probably haven't, for the most part. Um, and so, yeah, hearing from you and getting that sort of expert analysis and insight, I think that's going to be really good. So, um, yeah. where could people find you online?
Oddbird.net
Okay.
is my company, and Miriam Suzanne on Twitter.
Okay.
Oddbird on Twitter also for the
All right.
company.
All right.
Yeah, those are
Very
good
cool.
places to find me.
Excellent.
Everything else is linked from there.
Yeah. That's the best way to do that. Very cool. So, I'm going to say thank you very much. This has been fun. I love talking CSS
Yeah.
with people, and I'm just going to, for the people who are watching, just a couple more things. Our next Meet the Speaker actually will be on Tuesday, October 6th. So that's in 6 days at 2:30 p.m. We'll be talking to Sharon Steed, who's a teamwork expert and also one of our speakers for the fall. And then if anyone watching is interested, go to aneventapart.com and you can see the deal for what our lineup is, what the schedule is for Fall Summit. So you can see Miriam and Sharon and everyone else, and check out our deal on buying a 3-day pass and getting access to more content. So actually 6 days of content for the price of 3. But yeah, this was great. And actually, it would be fun to talk about this in more detail at some point. But first, I want to see your talk so that I know what I'm talking about when I talk to you the next time. So anyway, I'm looking forward to
Great.
that. So thanks much, and we'll see you in soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.